Hey everyone, you're listening to the Simple Electronics Podcast. I'm your host, Dan from the Simple Electronics YouTube channel. This episode is brought to you by PCBWay, but more about that later on because right now I've got a very special guest, Ruth Amos from the Kids Invent Stuff YouTube channel. How are you, Ruth?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Honestly, it's my honor. So I know you a little bit. Well, I don't know you. I know of you a little bit. But for those who don't know you, can you let us know who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah, so my name's Ruth, and I am an inventor, and people might know me as one half of Kids Invent Stuff on YouTube. So me and my friend Sean, we have a YouTube channel where we bring to life kids' invention ideas. So 4 to 11-year-olds send us their drawings and their videos of inventions they'd like to see brought to life. And that's what Sean and I do on that channel. I also do other things, but it's mainly around making stuff and doing slightly ridiculous things in the workshop.
I didn't prompt Ruth on this, so you'll have to forgive her answer. But Ruth, you are insane for the amount of work you take on for each video. Can you just break down how much work it is to make each video? Because it seems to me like it is a lot of work what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I suppose because there's two of us, and we have the awesome Alex who helps kind of manage some community stuff. But yeah, Sean and I, look at all the invention ideas that are sent in. We then decide which one we're going to build. Sometimes we have certain challenges. There's sometimes themes and things. So we decide what we're going to build. Then obviously we build it, which seems like a really easy step, but Sean and I live 300 miles away from each other. So I live in Sheffield, which is in the north of England, and Sean lives in Cornwall, which is possibly the furthest south you could get. So it's a good 6 hours drive away from each other. So we get together for usually 4 or 5 days. We build something, we film it, we test it. Then we take away all that footage and we edit it and we put it up on the channel. And we try and build something every month, although we are trying really hard to start to do 2 videos a month. But we also both do other things. So we're trying to balance that. But yeah, it's so much fun because we're really lucky. We get to build the things that you wouldn't usually get to make. So we've built 7-foot dinosaurs that mop the floor. We've built popcorn firing doorbells. We've built giant furry electric dog cars. And they're all really good fun. And they're all unique and different. So every day that I do my job is completely different because one day we're trying to solve how are we going to piece together this load of foam to make a dinosaur. The next day we might be trying to resin a giant carrot car, or we're just trying to work out how to test a giant electric toothbrush. So yeah, it's I think I probably win at having the best job.
And I think you're also selling it a little bit short because you folks are building this from the ground up. And so I'll just give an example for our listeners. I was just watching a one where you have a guitar that fires bubbles. And not only did you, if you think about the concept, it's not super difficult, but you guys went the extra mile. You built a false back for the guitar, which is shaped like the guitar. You got 3 commercial products, like bubble guns, basically. And then you rigged them up to all fire at the same time. You concealed this all within the back of the guitar. And then not only that, but you filmed it in a way that it's like a cohesive story going from A to B to C to D, even to the point of taking it out in the field and having the general population at this pub night, a band, try it out. I mean, the work you put in is incredible. And yeah, I am thoroughly impressed by your workflow.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to know that people watching the content think it's cohesive because Sean and I often feel like we're running around like headless chickens trying to work out what have we done. We often have a very limited amount of time to film, and so we're trying to work out, I mean, everyone that makes things knows it doesn't always go to plan. So we're always trying to work out how we can do that and show that in different ways and keep the audience engaged. And, we get little silly songs written about inventions, and we make fun of ourselves regularly on the internet, but we just want to show people how exciting and how fun and engaging making and inventing can be.
I have to also congratulate you for one part as well, because I think it's no surprise to you. You know your own audience, but a lot of makers watch your content. And the fact that just during this guitar build, just for as an example, I believe it was you that was drilling the hole for letting the bubbles out, and you drilled into the bubble reservoir, and the bubble fluid went everywhere. And I really appreciate that you left that in, because as a maker, it's very hard sometimes when you watch the videos of a maker you look up to, and the videos, typically a lot of times on maker channels, they're perfect. There's no mistakes. It's all first try done, right?
Oh, we
And it's
definitely make mistakes
that's
multiple
right.
times.
And yeah, that's just not the reality. And so yeah, I really appreciate you showing sort of the human side of making, because the best makers out there are probably the ones who have made the most mistakes along the way. So I really appreciate you showing that.
I think everything that we build has mistakes that are made along the way. Some more catastrophic than others. But yeah, I definitely think that is part of the process, and that's part of understanding how you make things. Because I'd say both Sean and I, we're not specialists in anything. I sit and watch these beautiful channels and these, really crafted videos of people who are like experts at building one thing, and that is not what Sean and I do. We kind of pick and choose things, so we know that we're not going to be the best at carving something out or whatever. And I think it's important to show people, people just having a go along the process of doing Kids Invent Stuff. When we first started, I didn't know how to weld. Like, that's a skill that I've picked up along the way and something that I'm constantly developing. And I think you're right. So often we see videos on the internet that look perfect and are unachievable. And particularly because our channel is family viewing, like, what sort of message is that to young people, to makers who are starting off? Like, we're always making mistakes. And sometimes as well, it's about that thought process. So there are, certain examples of inventions where we think it should work. And one of the early things that we built on the channel is like a disco jacket. And we had these LEDs, and the idea was to use sewable LEDs. And Sean was sewing this jacket at the same time we were making a Lego jacket. I was making the Lego jacket. Sean was making the disco jacket, and he's sewing all of the, like, literally hours spent sewing these LEDs. And the jacket was so fluffy that it just didn't work. And it was like 2:00 in the morning, and Sean's having to, take all the stitching out and use a soldering iron to burn holes in the jacket for LEDs to like wire them up. And, as a maker, yes, there may be not the funnest moments within a build, but no one was necessarily going to know that was going to happen until we did it. Like, do you know what I mean? It's just one of those things that comes with making. And personally, I think those challenges are often the moments where you really learn about yourself.
Oh, for sure. 100%. And so, like you said that, you learn welding along the way. What were your qualifications at the start of your channel? Like, what's your background like?
I would say I have no formal qualifications past the age of, so in the UK, you do did GCSEs, and you do A levels, which is what you do before you go to university. And I did A levels, but I didn't do anything past that. So when I was 16, when I was doing my GCSEs, my teacher challenged me to design something to help his dad, who'd had a stroke, go up and down his stairs. And so as part of my GCSE resistant materials, which is like product design, so as part of my product design coursework, I invented something called the Stair Steady, which is a specialist handrail that helps people go up and down their stairs. So if you imagine like a Zimmer frame, but for your stairs, and it has a locking mechanism on it. So, you can push the bar in front of you and it will lock in place. You can put your weight on it. And that was just supposed to be like a project that I did at school. And I ended up winning Young Engineer for Britain, and people wanted to buy the product. And so kind of before all of that, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I just chosen my university and everything. And I ended up starting a business and bringing the product to market. And I never ended up going to university, and just kind of, it was a bit of a weird one, but I don't really have any formal qualifications in that sense. And everything from that's kind of part of kids invent stuff are things that, I kind of just had a go at. I'm definitely not the most skilled maker in that sense, but I'm definitely naive enough to have a go. And that's what I found was really helpful when I started a business and had a product. And that's kind of what I've just taken on board moving forwards, is what is the worst that can happen if you just have a go and see. And I love making stuff. I love problem solving. And I don't have any formal qualifications in any of this.
That's great. That's actually more inspiring than anything. So are you saying if I go to your Twitter and the pinned tweet from 2018 of the little girl walking up the stairs with the little crossbar, you invented that?
Yeah, that was my GCSE project. Yeah. So, on social media, there's a few things. It's not something that I have necessarily spoken loads about on social media, I suppose, since starting Kids Invent Stuff. But yes, that was my GCSE resistant materials project. And that product is, available in the UK to buy, and in other parts of the world as an actual product.
That I think the word elegant is often overused when talking about solutions, but this is really an elegant solution. It's I'll just try to paint a word picture from what I'm looking, but it looks like it goes either replaces or on top of your banister, and it's like sort of like a lever that you can push one way, but you can't pull because of the lever will lock the mechanism, sort of. And so it really seems like the type of invention where you look at it and you're like, wow, why didn't I think of that? And here you are, and you have. That's incredible. I'm impressed. I'm really impressed.
Yeah, I think again, it's another feat of absolute naivety. It's a very simple product. It works on friction. It does have to replace the existing handrail. So there is a square handrail with the supporting bar that comes off it. And it works using friction and gravity to allow the user to walk up and down the stairs, and then at the top and the bottom of the stairs, it clears out of the way. But it is a very simple product, and it's the sort of thing I look back now and I think, knowing what I know now, I probably couldn't design it. There was something about being that age and knowing nothing that allowed me to do that. And it's funny you should say you expect someone that to have already been around. When I applied for a patent back in 2006 for the product, and you get back everything that is very similar or tries to do similar things. And I was like, this is it. Someone must have done it. Even when my teacher set me the challenge and said, design something that solves this problem, I was like, loads of people have this problem. There must be a product for it. And I kept Googling it and nothing came up. And then when I got the patent back as well, and I could see other people had similar ideas, but not in the same way. It was, really exciting. And since then, there is another product that does solve the problem as well, but it works slightly differently across the time. So, I was 16 when I first invented the product. I know of 2 other products that try and do something similar, one of which doesn't exist anymore. But that kind of taught me a lot, because again, I knew nothing about starting a business or how you bring a product to market or anything. So a very steep learning curve. I think I like a challenge, and I like learning new skills.
Yeah, and we're not talking about those other inferior products. This is the Ruth Amos product. This
Oh,
is the one
thanks.
we
Yeah,
want.
yeah. It's funny though because whenever I post about it on my social media, that you didn't invent that. I saw the girl that invented that on the telly, and I'm like, yep, that was me. But yes, it's a very weird thing seeing something that you've designed being in someone's home and being used. And yeah, I don't think you can ever kind of explain that feeling. I recently showed it to my little boy who's 4, and that again was one of those very weird moments. At 16, when I first designed it, I never thought I would be showing it to my own children. Very weird.
Yeah, we use mechanisms like this in the automotive world to tension things and stuff like that. I would have never put two and two together to use it as an assistive device. So that's incredible.
The idea actually came from a toy that my brother had. It's like a bit like a desk toy. So it's a metal stick, and it has on it either a cuckoo or a woodpecker, like a little bird. And you take the bird to the top of the stick, and you like flick it, and it's on a spring, and it like judders down. And the way that works was that was the first thing that made me think about using friction, and the way that you could have a locking mechanism on a handrail essentially. And so that was kind of I suppose the light bulb moment in hindsight. There were lots of other things that fed into it, but that was an important moment.
So, what would you say are some of your favorite skills that you picked up while doing Kids Invent stuff then?
Ooh, well, I definitely have to say welding, because that was like a big thing. I'd always been fascinated with welding. It seemed like I always describe it as sewing with fire, and I used to see things that had been welded, and I don't know. It just yeah, and it's one of those things you really have to try to understand whether you're going to enjoy it or not. And the moment, even the first time that I had a go on a really rubbish welder, welding completely the wrong materials in hardly any, I didn't have any fancy PP. I just literally bought a welding mask off Amazon. um, I was hooked instantly. I loved it. And so that's been a really interesting skill. And I started off MIG welding, and this year I've started to learn a little bit of TIG welding. And I'm definitely a hobbyist. There are definitely some way more qualified welders out there, but I just love I love having it as a skill for making with, because there are certain things where just be able to weld something is just the simplest and most elegant solution.
Something that really stood out is when you said sewing with fire, because I'm a basically Mythbusters kid. I grew up with Mythbusters, and so Adam Savage once said that it's just a hot glue gun for metal. And I think normalizing these terms, like explaining it in other ways, is super important, because the world of welding could be quite I don't know how to describe it, but like scary to get into. It's something that newcomers think, well, I'll never weld. Even Adam Savage had said when he was 23, he said, oh, I'd love to learn how to weld, but I guess I'm too old to learn at this point. And he says he never felt sillier looking back at a statement that he's made than that exact statement. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It is sewing with fire. I mean, it's all the same principles. You use all the same sections of your brain to do all kinds of making. It's just you just need to apply it in a different way. So yeah. Do you have any maybe advice for someone who's tempted to try welding but hasn't tried it yet?
I would find the either closest makerspace, or open day, or somewhere where you can have a go with under the guidance of someone that knows what they're doing, and just do it. I literally was like, I just complained to people for ages, like, I'd love to have a go at welding. And my dad, who is not really a welder, he was like, oh, I think I've got an old one in the back of the garage. And so like one afternoon I made him dig it out, and yeah, had a go. And as soon as I tried it, I was like hooked. And it's something that I work with Lincoln Electric in the UK, and we run sessions where people can come and try welding. We go into colleges and run like women in welding courses where, for the day, a young person can come along and try it and see what they think, because there is nothing like trying it. and there are so many people who turn up and they're like, oh, I'm not sure about this. But as soon as they get the welder in their hands and they see the sparks and their eyes light up and they're like, oh, this is amazing. So yeah, you kind of have to try it, I think. And I always find it interesting, the fact that so many of these things seem a lot, maybe people play up. I'm not saying that using tools and things isn't dangerous, but there are a lot of dangerous things that also appear in our kitchens, and no one seems to be putting off people from having a go at cooking. And I think that's always the thing that interests me, is like, yes, you know, a drill has bits that spin, and yes, you could cause damage, but you could also cause damage with, you know, a kitchen knife or like, so, you know, a smoothie maker. There are blades in that as well. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's really interesting, people's different perceptions on different kind of tools depending on where they are in your house.
Yeah, my wife and I, we do meal prep all the time with really sharp knives, but I would say most of our kitchen injuries come from cleaning the blender. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you have to
Yeah,
go like
yeah.
along the blades. It's just, it is what it is. And for welding, I'll agree with you. There's some danger, but you just need proper PPE and you'll be okay. Like a welding helmet, auto darkening ones are very cheap
Yeah,
nowadays.
this is it. Like nowadays, I think, you know, my dad was amazed when I showed him my auto darkening helmet for the first time. He was like, oh my word, like this would have made welding so much easier. He used to work in a garage a very long time ago, and they didn't have anything like that. And I think PPE has progressed so much since then. And there are so many other things that, you know, I think people get a little put off because they feel like it's quite overwhelming. And as someone who has along this journey learned a lot of skills, I would just recommend, like, just constantly, like, you know, have a go. If you know someone that has a cool tool, like, ask them to use it, ask them to have a go, learn how something works. Because yeah, it's like a constant learning journey.
And I'll also add that I don't know if your experience is the same, but in my experience, makers are all nerds. So if you want to talk to them about their tools, they will talk your ears off. So go ahead and ask someone a question because they're happy to answer most of the time.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And yeah, a lot of, you know, even my own workshop has developed even over the past like few years, and talking to other makers about, you know, I recently bought like a little mini lathe, and, you know, talking to other makers about, you know, how the best way to set it up, or do you know what I mean? And there's so much content. Even if you don't want to talk to people, there are so many useful videos that you can watch and so much knowledge out there.
Yeah, for sure. And so the shop that we see in Kids Advent Stuff, is that your shop? Is that Sean's shop? Is that something rented?
You will probably see a mix. So at the moment, the last few videos have been filmed in my workshop. We also have a Kids Invent Stuff workshop in Cornwall, which is a slightly bigger space. So we built things like the carrot car there. We used to rent a space above where our workshop in Cornwall was, right at the beginning. So when we first started the project and we couldn't afford to rent our own space, we were in like a shared workshop. So the very early videos, that's where we are. And then we, just before the pandemic, we got our own space. And so some of the videos are from there, and then some of them are from my workshop, which I built, I feel like maybe 2 years ago now. I feel like I've always had it, but it's actually quite a recent thing. There are a handful of videos when I was very heavily pregnant that were filmed in the back of my parents' garage. So yeah, I think there's a few different workspaces, but now you tend to see Sean and I either in my workshop or the workshop in Cornwall.
Just a quick interruption to talk about this episode's sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay has been a long-term sponsor of the channel, and I think they're a good match for my channel because they provide quality PCBs for a reasonable price. You can get boards manufactured up to 100 mils by 100 mils for just $5, including shipping to Canada, $15 US, including shipping to USA, $12 US, which is incredibly cheap for professionally manufactured PCBs. I can personally attest to the quality of these PCBs, and so if you want a circuit immortalized forever, check out PCBWay.com with the link in the description. Now back to the conversation. Now be honest with us. Which workshop do you prefer working in?
Ooh, I mean, there is a real joy of just being able to like roll out of bed, walk to the bottom of the garden, and go in my workshop. The one in Cornwall is a little bit bigger and has some different tools. I'd say the variety, yeah, but it's kind of. But I don't know if I necessarily have a favorite. There is something nice about a bit more space in Cornwall. That's always good. But yeah, I just love, I don't know, I suppose walk into my workshop and I'm like, oh my word, like it's insane to even be able to have this and just build things in it. Like what a space.
And it's yours, so you can do whatever you want to it. I think
Yeah.
that's the big thing with borrowing stuff, is that you're always careful. You always have in the back of your mind that it's someone else's, but yours is yours.
Exactly. And you know, the nice thing about, although I'm sat in my workshop now looking around it thinking it's looking very messy for me, but the nice thing about it is it's set up like it was designed to build and film in. So although it's not a very big space, there are certain things that I really thought about when I was building it with filming and making things in mind. And I think if it had just been a space I converted, it wouldn't have those things. Like it has so many plugs and sockets in it. It has like super wide like workbench at the back, like certain lighting things. Do you know what I mean? Like, all with kind of the ease of making and filming in mind, which does make it a joy, because it's kind of, yeah, it might not be big, but you can do a lot of things in it.
Oh, for sure. I want to detract the conversation a little bit, because you talked about 3 members of the team. So yourself, Sean, and you had someone for social media. But I feel like you're missing one member named Luna.
Luna. Yeah,
Who's
Luna
yeah.
is Sean's dog. So Sean's had Luna from being a puppy, and Luna has appeared in a lot of videos and is very much interested in making, and she pretty much thinks everything is made for her. So she's very excited by it all. But yeah, it's she definitely is the coolest member of the team.
Oh yeah. Well, her temper is quite cool. She seems to just go along with whatever.
Yeah, she is very chilled. And she just kind of, you know, chills out in the workshop. Obviously she's out the way if we're doing anything too noisy or painting or anything, but apart from that, she's quite chilled. And even when we're filming, there's only ever been a handful of times we've had to take her out the workshop because she's been too noisy while we're filming. But yeah, she loves it. She gets involved. She's constantly trying to sneak off with build components that she thinks are toys for her. And yeah, it makes it highly entertaining.
Yeah, I saw her walk off with the one of the toilet brushes from the hairstyling episode.
Yeah, and one of the videos that comes out next month, we built something and tested it with her in mind, and oh my word, she was so excited. So yeah, if you love
Awesome.
Luna content, keep your eyes peeled, because next month's a good one.
I'm a Luna fan. I'm a dog person. My wife's also a dog person. We're dog people through and through, but our house here is so small that we don't have a dog. So we live vicariously through the neighborhood dogs and the YouTube dogs. So even when she's busy working and I find a dog in a YouTube video, I'll timestamp it and send it to her, and then we get to enjoy dogs for a little bit.
Nice. I'll make sure we add more Luna into the video for you then.
Awesome. That'd be great. What would you say would be like maybe a couple of the happy consequences of making kids invent stuff, like maybe some, real life interactions, or I don't know, what kind of positivity came out of it for you?
Ooh, so much. I mean, along the way, Sean and I have made some great friends. I think the maker community is super welcoming, and it's a community kind of like no other. And yeah, having made friends along the way, and other makers who are building cool things and getting to have conversations I just never thought were actual real conversations. And you're talking about how to build weird and wonderful inventions. Yeah, that's some of my favorite things. And also, I think the maker community is so international that one of the joys of my life now is talking to friends who are based all around the world. Like, that's so lovely, particularly like even with the pandemic and things, you couldn't see people in your everyday life, and you couldn't see people internationally. But I spoke to so many friends and makers, and do you know what I mean? It was just because we couldn't go out, we all had more time to talk to each other on the internet, so it didn't matter where anyone was based. So yeah, that was quite nice. There's lots of weird memories. For a while, when we first started the channel, we'd have like a list of notes of like all the weird things we've bought for builds, or like bizarre things that happened. Sean and I will often joke that we're pretty unemployable, but we often joke that if we were to be employed, and they ask those standard, like, can you tell me a time you used teamwork, or can you tell me a time you had to problem solve? And Sean and I think we have like the weirdest stories, to the point they'd be like, what? Well, there was this one time we made this giant cake and we had to race it down a hill and this went wrong, or do you know what I mean? So yeah, there's definitely, sometimes we do take a step back and think this is totally bizarre. And like, I never expected to be building a giant rainbow unicorn while in labor. That was definitely not on my bucket list. So it's just all these like weird and wonderful stories. But yeah, I think my life has definitely taken a different turn because of making. The things that I get to be involved with, and I think this is the beauty about sharing your passions and what you do on the internet. I think, yes, there are negative things that come from that, but there are some really big positives, because I always think if people can see what you can do and what you enjoy doing, then it's more likely that you have opportunities to do that thing. So I would say, since doing kids invent stuff, my time has become more and more fuller with the things that I like to do, or things linked to inventing and making, just because people know that that's something that I'm passionate about and that they can see that I can do, and all that sort of thing. So I definitely think, yeah, that's been a real positive.
Awesome. And actually, I will take just a moment here to plug your Patreon, you and Sean's. So if you want to help Ruth and Sean make bigger and better things, they do have a Patreon, which I believe is just patreon.com/kidsinventstuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And once you take a look at their videos, you'll understand the scale, because it's pretty much one invention for one video. And so this is why I called Ruth insane earlier, because the amount of work looks absolutely exhausting. And knowing that you guys are 6 hours apart makes it even more impressive. Knowing that you don't have a
Crazy, more crazy.
yeah, knowing that you don't have a background in engineering, or even like something manual like carpentry or mechanics or whatever, it makes it all the much more impressive. So I do urge, if you're listening and you have a couple bucks a month to spare, I would say that's a great place to spend it, right there on the Patreon. Would you agree?
Thank you. I mean, I would totally agree, but thank you very much. That's really kind. Yeah, I think, people often, think they can't build something, and you totally can. I am here to tell you, you totally can build something. And yeah, I think that, I don't know, there's something beautiful about the maker community. So if you are a patron already, thank you. And if you become a patron, thank you so much.
You have a sign on your workbench, and I don't want to misquote it. Do you know the one I'm talking about? The black one with the white letters?
Oh, I'm literally looking at it now. What did it say in the back of the video? Because I do occasionally change it. It currently has the
Oh,
same thing on it. It's had the same thing on it for a few months now, but I do occasionally change it.
it said something about getting started.
Yeah, the secret of making progress is to get started.
There we go. So I felt like that saying was well placed right now in this conversation, because that's true. And I tell my students, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because I tell them the only reason I'm better than them is because I've made more mistakes than they've made attempts. And so I think the truth is that if you're afraid to make stuff, just make it. And if you don't like the way it turned out, make it again. and that it's that simple. Whatever you made it's not lost. It's all experience along the way.
Totally. And there's things that we've built on the channel that I look back now and both Sean and I can see not necessarily better, but different ways of building that. Sean did go to university. Sean never expected to go to university and did. I always thought I'd go to university and didn't. But he was a renewables energy engineer, and then did like a fine arts degree. And taking that engineering and doing the art side of it, I think was something that really kind of opened up his I don't know. I think sometimes as engineers, unless we can do something perfectly, we just don't start. And that's something that Sean and I realized we couldn't do on the channel. One of the great things that I think has really served us is the fact that we have a limited time to build together. Because there are many things that appear on our channel and we're like, it'd be really nice to have had an extra few days on this or whatever, but we would have never finished it. And I know personally, because I'm building things for my channel that don't have these sorts of deadlines on, and I push them out because I'm like, it's not quite right yet. And so I see that on other sides of my work is actually having some of these deadlines and just making yourself do it and realizing that it will never be perfect is such a good exercise.
Oh, for sure. And I think I had Becky Stern on here not too long ago say the exact same thing. Like, the secret to making her Secret Santa gift was that it had a ship date, and
Yes.
wherever it stands at that point, that's how she has to ship it. So not only did that make it be able to be completed in a timeline, but it also meant that she got to focus more on the things that were important, and then if there was more time, she could add embellishment or whatever.
And Becky Stern is the content queen. Like, I look and think, wow, we build a lot, but Becky, oh my word, yeah,
She's
she's
nuts.
incredible.
Yeah, and again, that's another thing where on YouTube you don't get what you deserve, you get what you get, because Becky should be the head of like a million subscriber channel, but instead she's built followings for other companies.
Yes.
Right, because she's done a lot of great work with other making companies like Adafruit and DigiKey and all sorts of things like that. So yeah, Becky's a beast. I hope she takes that in the right way.
Yeah. It's so interesting as well, because there's so many different types of making, in the sense of, there are some channels where it's really detailed, the craftsmanship on something is like insane. And then there's other things where you're, trying to push boundaries to make something that's a bit crazy, or you're trying to like push your 3D printer to the limit. And I love seeing all these different types of making. And I think it's one of the things that I realized, because as makers, like, it is really fun to collaborate and make with other people, but it is also really tricky. And finding a way to celebrate those makers really was like the driving point behind Secret Santa, was that whole idea of like, how can we collaborate when we all live so far away, and how do we show off our unique skills, but also try and build that kind of maker network up. And Secret Santa just seemed to be the best solution to that.
Oh, and it made it's a fan. I don't know. Did somebody made it? Somebody invented it. Was that you?
That it was originally my idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard a little bit through the grapevine, but I wasn't 100% sure. Plus, I've got
It's not
terrible
really
recall.
it's not really something that's it's kind of doesn't really matter to who came up with it, if that makes sense. But it's, if anything, like, it's the nice thing was the fact that at the time when I was like, we should do this, I don't even know if we had like 10,000 subscribers at that point. Like, we were tiny. And I remember being at Maker Central, and Stephanie was there, and Alan Pan, and Colin was there. And I remember having the conversation with us and saying, I've got this crazy idea. What do you think? And them all being like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. Like, yeah, we'd be up for that. And I remember like messaging like Hacksmith and things and be like, shall we do this? Like, is this a crazy idea? And everyone like, yeah, cool, we'll do it. And yeah, it's the funnest and the most stressful thing ever because shipping things you've made internationally is not fun for anyone. But it's a great way to collaborate because it can be really tricky. Like we did a collaboration with a Stephanie when she was over for Maker Central, and we were at Maker Central trying to hack something like on the floor of the show, and that's always tricky trying to film. And then the other time we did a collab, and we did one with Colin, we all pretty much lived together for like 3 weeks to make it happen. So it's quite tricky when you're a maker because things take time when you're making stuff.
Absolutely. I was telling Becky that I would be honored yet terrified to be part of the Maker Secret Santa, because it's like making, but it's making for someone else, which is not
Yeah.
the kind of stress I want to live with. So I would I'm happy watching, but the setup is perfect because you go in a loop, right? You get
Yes.
to see all of the creators, and that's how I discovered your channel. I watched This Old Tony. I'm a big fan of This Old Tony, and I don't remember how I got around to your channel, but it was through the Secret Santa. So I started with This Old Tony and made my way around. So it was pretty neat.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one because there's always so many amazing makers, and you kind of don't want that loop to be too long. But also on a logistical level, it is quite a tricky thing because even though we have a deadline, Becky Stern is literally the queen of this sort of stuff. She has like never sent anything out late. Like I'm always amazed at how quickly and like how on it she is. But it can sometimes be tricky with, on the run up to Christmas and customs things, and however you try and do it, it's always that kind of last minute dash. And so it does get quite stressful towards the date of, sharing those videos, because you're trying to wait for everyone to receive their gift and film and edit. That's why, people often say like, either that's a really great amount of people or they'd like to be more. And it's an interesting one to balance, but I just love watching everyone's videos because we don't know what they are. You only know what you've made and what you've received, and even then what you've received, you get so little context around like how it's made and all the rest of it. So I just love watching those videos and seeing how that thing was made and the video behind it and what everyone else has made for everyone else. Like it's great.
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic fantastic circle. And I think, like, I can't comment on the size because obviously I'd like more, but will I have time to watch more? Who knows, right?
Yeah,
Whoever.
it's a tricky one. Usually I sit down and I'll watch them all on a loop and stuff, and it's a good few hours. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, I don't know. Yeah. Hey, people can let me know. But yeah, it's a nice way to celebrate, and also there's nice, this year Maker Central, I think it's great that they've brought some other international makers as well. So there'll be some, I think people like Emily the Engineer's coming over and Zyla and things. So it's nice that events like that as well are thinking about getting makers in the same room together as well, if that makes sense. Because it's always just lovely to meet other content creators.
Oh, for sure. I'm actually looking. The time is going by so quickly, and now I'm panicking. Okay. So you build on a timeline, which seems to be quite the theme for your channel. Are there any parts that are sort of shortcut parts that you can reliably use to make things happen? Like, I'll tell you something I noticed as an automotive guy. You seem to use a lot of automotive wiper motors to make things spin. Do you have any sort of other things like that?
Yeah, so there's certain kind of go-to. What tends to happen is Sean and I will look through all the different inventions we're sent in, and we'll narrow it down to a few that we like, and we'll be talking them through around how we might make it. Maybe what is the YouTube video? What's the thumbnail? What's the story? How might we test it? Is it similar to something else we've built? And then once we've worked out what that thing is, we will then start to be like, okay, so this spins, maybe we can use a motor or a pulley, or maybe we do this, maybe we can, maybe we automate it, maybe it has a sound to it, and we start kind of looking at the kind of bare bones of the invention. So yes, there are certain things like, if we're going to make something float, we have these big barrels that we'll quite often use for things. We have a whole collection of windscreen wiper motors, or we've collected a few carcasses of mobility scooters and things like that, or particularly good the little motorized golf trolleys. Like whenever we see one of those on Facebook Marketplace, we're like, yep, we'll have that. Because the motorized wheels and things like that. So there are certain things that, if we're going to build a robot or we want something that floats, there are certain kind of go-to things. And then it kind of depends. We do try and learn new skills. So like when we made the dinosaur, there was no way we could make that in one, but we realized like if we sliced it, we could get each layer of foam cut out and put it together like a big jigsaw. And that was the first time we'd ever done that on the channel. When we build vehicles, some vehicles have started off with a base of some kind. Other things we've built completely from scratch, and then covered them with different things, resin, for like the carrot, for example, for the furry electric dog car, that's like a metal frame and it's got all sorts of different materials under the fluff. So yeah, there's certain principles that are used slightly more regularly than others.
Yeah, it's all very impressive because and people who haven't seen your channel, I want them to go take a look. But the breadth of things that you guys have built is incredibly impressive. I mean, it just looks like you could be working on, a robot arm one day, a toothbrush another, a double slide the other, a pack that fires, stuff out of your arm the next day. It really goes to show how much you guys have sort of refined the process to be able to do all these different things all the time. It's incredibly impressive.
I think the more you make as well, the more you collect things. Like we do try and keep inventions in one piece when we can, but there are certain things that just don't survive. And if they don't, then, they're put back in, or if, we've ordered a load of gas canisters for something and we've got some left over. So, the more you make, the more you have the things you need to make with, if that makes sense, because you have all these, particularly when you're trying to problem solve. I'm looking around the workshop now because we've just finished a build and it's a mess. And it involved some catapult stuff. And I have a load of different things that we'd ordered that we thought might be suitable until they'd arrived. Well, they'll go in a box, and next time we need something like that, we're like, oh, this would be great. So I think there is that kind of collecting that goes on, slight hoarding, but collecting of useful things. But I think, I don't know. I think so often it's just taking it step by step. So we don't always know. We have a rough idea, maybe what we want it to. We obviously want it to look as close to the kids' drawing as possible, but we don't entirely know how we're going to get there when we start.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Is there, I like, you've made tons of stuff, but is there one thing in particular that you're incredibly proud of? Maybe because you didn't think it was possible when you started, or maybe because you learned a lot, but is there one thing that really sticks out as being like, yeah, this I'm proud of?
Oh, just one. Oh, it's
Well,
tricky.
you
It
can
is
speak
tricky.
to a few. It's fine.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's kind of two ways of being proud. There's the things that we made that when we were testing them, we were unsure. So one of the things we built quite early on was a gravity racer that was cake shaped, but also made out of cake. So it looked like a big iced cake and it had candles on it. But it was made out of vegan blocks of cake that we'd made in the microwave. And that was a big build because, it was, we weren't entirely sure if we could build it. We spent a lot of money on cake things, not very much money on the brakes on the actual gravity racer. And that really sticks out for me because we couldn't really test it because we didn't want to damage it. And I knew I was going to drive it, and it was quite scary, the thought of driving the cake down the hill. And also the steering was a bit weird. So when you steered left, it went right, and vice versa, because it was like behind the cake, and that was never the plan. And it was just a little interesting. And yeah, the end of that day when we'd like raced it and we really wanted like a really good crash, and we had the crash, and yeah, there's a lot of pride that I personally feel around that cake, just because of how much we overcome to get that video, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And there's a
no,
few
for sure.
things like that where, you know, jumping off towers on a zip wire and things like that, where it's like the video at the end, we're like, yes, that's great. And obviously some of the bigger things, like I mentioned the dinosaur or the carrot car, when it's like a big build, and you know there's a lot of hours that's gone into that. But I don't know. I think one of the things that really sticks out is the Rube Goldberg machine, because that was, you know, we combined 60 kids invention ideas in like a giant Rube Goldberg machine. Which, if you don't know what a Rube Goldberg machine, it's like a game of mousetrap. So like it's like a chain reaction machine. So one thing sets off the next, which sets off the next. And so we combined 60 kids invention ideas, and we obviously wanted the whole thing to run in one go. So we built it in a big warehouse in London. We had a team of people helping, and it took us about a week to build it. And then we had about 3 days to film, because we wanted it to run in one take. And so it failed 74 times. And every time it failed, we have to go back and reset it. And it was just such an exercise in failure and resilience. And 45 minutes before we needed to pack up and stop filming and take it down, it worked. And that was like, yeah, just one of those moments that was just insane. Thinking like, wow, we got it to work. And it's interesting. Like, I think when you make content, there are certain things you build and you love the build, but you're unsure about the video, and vice versa. You might build something, you think, oh, it's all right. And then you see the video and you're like, oh no, I love it on the video. So I also think there's that kind of thrown into it as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, certain builds behind the scenes are quite tricky to get working. And sometimes there's a real pride when it does work. And other times you're like, I never want to see that thing ever again.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I don't make anything nearly as complicated as what you guys make, but I feel the exact same way. I mean, sometimes you just barely get your head around the concept enough to make it work, and then you're like, you're done with it. And other times, like, I've built things that I still use to this day. So yeah, there's it's both, right? It's always both.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's nice to have a real mix of stuff. I think it depends on the sort of maker that you are. I love a project and I love problem solving, but I really struggle doing the same thing over and over again. So kids event stuff is perfect because each month is different. And usually, like, I don't know, using resin, for example, at the end of a resin build, Sean and I are like, let's not do a resin build again, because, you know, it's all the fumes and all the rest of it. And then you give it like 6 to 8 months, which is probably when your channel wants to see something else that's built that involves resin. And you're like, yeah, let's do it again. So it's a nice cycle of like every month's different. 1 month you're building, you know, a popcorn firing doorbell, and the next month you're building like a giant slide, or do you know what I mean? So the variety in it is really good for me. I know that's not the same for everyone else, but that's the nice thing about making. You can either repeat the same thing over and over again, or you can make completely different things. So yeah, that's something that I really appreciate within this job.
Tell me, you still daily use the cheese grater attachment. That looks so convenient to me.
Well, Alan has the cheese grater attachment because we shipped that
Oh,
to
true.
Alan. So yeah, unfortunately, yeah, if I had it, I would be using that all the time.
I forgot
Um,
that was a
yeah,
secret
that went
setup.
to Alan. So yeah, I mean, there are certain things um, that get used and that are around. There are also occasionally things you get a little broken. Um, the the car that we first put the scissor lift in the back of, so the seat goes up through the roof, was in really good working order for a while, until we also then converted it to like fire slime, and that attracted a load of ants. So like things like that,
Oh
unfortunately, that
no.
didn't last. The ants got the car. But then there are other inventions where, yeah, they still work really well, and you know, occasionally get rolled out for school visits and things like that. So
Oh, what's the reaction you get during school visits?
uh It's probably, apart from looking through invention ideas, it's probably my second, and I think Sean would probably say this as well, our second favorite part of the job is going into schools, because usually it's to like do an assembly and you turn up and you're like, I'm an engineer and inventor and I'm a YouTuber, and instantly you get their attention because they're all like, oh, YouTube. And we tend to go into primary schools, which are like 4 to 11-year-olds, and talking to them about inventing and the skills that we use and showing them some videos, and they're usually just so excited, and then they go off and draw their invention ideas and we take them back, and sometimes we'll build one from that school or whatever. And yeah, it's one of just seeing their eyes light up at like, oh my word, like I could be an inventor, I could make something, is it's so rewarding.
And if you're listening, maker of any age, yes, you can be an inventor. You can make stuff. I mean, nobody would ever argue that Ruth is unable to build stuff and she has no formal training. So there you go. Anybody can do it. Maybe not as good as Ruth first try, but
Oh, I
eventually.
definitely, believe me, like I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly trying to pick up things, or I think using tools, unless you had someone, I don't know, unless maybe you're an apprentice or someone showed you, there'll be certain things where I'm doing something on, and someone will be like, oh, if you do this, like that makes it easier. And I'm like, oh, why do we not share some of these hints and tips more? So I'm constantly learning. We run workshops with a charity that I'm involved with, called Girls with Drills, and we build planters and we go into schools and we get young people trying power tools, and it's just something that I think we should be doing more of. So if you are a maker, invite someone that isn't a maker into your workshop to build something, and if you're not a maker, find someone and just say, can I use your tools, please?
Yeah, I mean, I plan on. I didn't do it because of the pandemic, but this summer I plan on plonking a table on my front lawn because I'm not too far from a sports field, and I plan on putting a table on my front lawn and just have something 3D printing. And if anyone wants to come chat about what a 3D printer is and how it works, then I'll be there. So, I mean, I think the important thing is when you have something that you like doing, you should share it, because I think a lot of people don't know the option is there. Like 3D
Yeah,
printers used to be like $20,000, but now you can buy them off Amazon for not much money. And I don't think people know. I don't think everybody knows how affordable it's gotten. So, yeah.
exactly. And I mean, even if I think back to when I was at school, getting hands on components and things was a little tricky. I remember trying to get materials for prototypes, and I wasn't a business, I didn't have a business account. Whereas now you can go online, you can buy electronics, you can buy all sorts of things. On our channel, we love taking things that exist and take them apart. Like for the bubble machine, we had to go up building our own, and we're like, nope, that's not as good as taking apart this bubble gum. And there's so many things where we do that on the channel, where we take existing things and use them. I'm constantly looking at like some of my little boys' toys and some of the others. I'm like, oh, that's a cool mechanism. Like if we took that off there, that'd be useful. So there's loads of things in the world around us, and having a go at making some circuits, or there's so many things that you can have a go at, and just see what it's like. Local maker spaces, like I love it. There's so many options.
Oh, for sure. I have a question that I throw every one of my guests and see how they answer. Can I throw it to you now?
Yeah, I mean the pressure, but yeah.
No pressure. It's open-ended. There's no wrong answers. It's just to see how you would manipulate it.
Okay.
So the question goes, you get a grant, so think unlimited funds, to start the business of your dreams. Now, it doesn't have to be profitable, because you're going to get funded, but it does have to provide either a service or a product. What kind of business would you start?
Oh, I mean, I would just get you to send Kids Invent Stuff the money, because if we had more money, we could build bigger and better inventions, and build more inventions. So I think that the cheating answer to that is we'll just write the check to Kids Invent Stuff. The other side of it, like a slightly more serious,
Well, I'll tell you why, while you think of it, that your answer is not cheating, because the goal when I developed this question was to see, like, if money wasn't an issue, what would you be doing for a living? and it just so happens that you are doing what you love for a living.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I would definitely, yeah, kids event stuff is definitely the thing. We're very lucky to have some amazing supporters and obviously Patreon and stuff, but we do, we run it on a shoestring. And I think, yeah, it'd be cool to have more resources to be able to build more things and bring other people on board. There's some amazing, I have a real, as someone who's kind of always been freelance, I really struggle with working with people and them not being paid. So even from day one, like anyone we've brought in to film with us or whatever, we've paid them. And it's the same with like, there are other makers where I would love to get them to come and build with us, but you know, they can't just take 4 days off their channel or their other jobs or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, if there was more resources, it would allow us to do more collabs and build bigger things. So yeah, definitely that would be the dream.
Yeah, absolutely. But do you think the funding would change the fundamental of the channel? Because I feel like a lot of what's beautiful about your channel, if you don't mind me saying, is that you are doing this on sort of like a budget and time constraint, because I can see, you know, common parts in your builds, and I think it just gives it a lot of charm, and it makes it a lot more maybe accessible compared to a hacksmith. There's nothing wrong with what the hacksmith is doing, but I feel like with enough time and effort, I can do what you're doing. And, you know, I would probably need like $1 million to do what the hacksmith is doing, for example.
Yeah, I don't think it would be in that sense because Sean and I both like that side of it. One of the things that, I mean, Sean and I literally, we build, we film, we edit. And I think there are certain things where that's a lot of our headspace being taken up by, you know, not only are we trying to build something, but we're thinking, how are we going to film this and edit it? And occasionally we bring people in, depending on the project, to help us film. But, you know, to regularly have someone to film with us or to edit would allow us to build more, you know, to be able to bring in some other cool people who have other skills that could help. And, you know, we're aware as well that maybe, you know, the two of us are maybe not the most diverse makers, and we'd love to shine a spotlight on some of the other incredible makers who are doing things. But again, like we would want to pay them for their time, and that's not always possible because of like budgets and stuff. So we don't ask them because I feel like people should be paid for their time. So yeah, I think in that sense, I think we're quite happy with. The whole point is that the builds are accessible. I mean, we've even had big discussions when I started to learn to weld, because Sean was like, is that accessible to a primary school student or, you know, someone who's not a maker? And we decided that in the right situation that it was fine to use. But we're constantly having those conversations of like, when we're making things, like, is this something, you know, is this something that someone would be able to make? Because you're right, if we sit there and we've got, you know, loads of CNC machined parts and all the rest of it, like, yes, we could build some cool things, but the accessibility is important in what we do. So I don't think it would change our values. I just think it might allow us to produce more content. And maybe, I mean, Sean and we've built over 70 kids invention ideas, and we've built at least one invention like every single month since we started. So that's quite intense.
Yeah, that's the insanity I was referring to earlier.
Yeah.
It seems like a
So yeah, I
lot of
think it
work.
might give us, yeah, a little bit of a better work-life balance with my money.
For sure.
I do feel like these are the things we talk about in our monthly meetings. It's like, how can we do this? I feel like, yeah, this is like going to a mentor session.
Look, I could talk to you literally all day, but I don't think either of us have the time to do that. So I'd like to hit on one more thing, if that's okay with you. You're going to be at a couple makery things this year. Can you talk to a little bit about where you're going and where people might be able to see you if they're going to makery type events as well?
Yeah, so if you are in the UK or you're thinking of traveling to the UK for Maker Central, Sean and I will be there at Maker Central very excited to see people. Love I love seeing people at that event. It's one of my favorite things, particularly last year after COVID. It was like so joyful seeing people who, I mean, we even got to meet some of the inventors of like some of the people that invented the things we built on the channel. Like, how cool is that? So yeah, Maker Central, which is in May. And then in July, I will be in San Francisco for open source, which I'm also very excited about because I get to go over to America and meet some awesome makers and people in the States who I wouldn't usually, I can understand why lots of people in the States don't fly over for Maker Central. But yeah, if you're in the States and you're near San Francisco, come say hi.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure who's the head of Maker Central, but I do know that Open Sauce, it's William Osman and team that are putting that together. So if you guys are already fans, I mean, you get to go there, probably meet Will et al, and then you also get to see Ruth and Sean. So I think it's a really good deal.
Yeah, Maker Central is Nick Zametti. So yeah, so lots of these events now I think are kind of maker led because we realize how important it is to get to see other makers and to kind of have that time together. But yeah, if you're around in the UK or you're in the US, they're the two things that they'll be at this year.
And I'll just be sitting here all alone in Canada because nobody makes maker events here.
You should make one, and then we can all fly over to Canada.
There we go. Yeah, I'd love to I'd love to do that. I don't think I need the stress of starting a maker
Yeah, it
event
did make
because
me laugh when William announced it because he's like, "Yeah, all make events are pretty much failing, but I'm gonna make one." You're like, "Yes, I love it."
yeah, I mean, I so feel his gusto. If I had the ability to, I would, because I'm always complaining about let's say lack of documentation. So then I'm like, well, I guess I'm making documentation, and it's the same. I feel him completely. So tell me, where do you want people to go find your stuff? Obviously, it's going to be kids event stuff on YouTube, and all the links will be in the description. But where else can they find you?
Yeah, so I mean, if you search kids event stuff on pretty much any platform, if we're on it, we will come up. But then, yeah, if you want kind of other maker content, I'm also on, the usuals: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, as Ruth Amos. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the two places, either kids invent stuff or Ruth Amos, and you should get all the maker content.
Yeah, do it because I think the kids invent stuff is awesome. And I'm just checking. You also have a couple things on your personal channel. Do you want people to go check those out?
Oh yeah, check those out. I would like to do more. Time is a big thing, and that whole kind of perfection thing I was talking about. There's, it's much easier when you have a set time frame to do things. But yes, I have got more videos in the pipeline on my channel. But of course, there is always content going up on Kids Invent Stuff.
And also, I want you to at least go check out the Patreon page. If you can throw a couple bucks, I'm sure Ruth and Sean would appreciate it. But at the very least, go take a look and see if it's up your alley. But I mean, I'm pretty sure it is if you're listening to this podcast. So definitely do that.
Thank you.
Is there any closing thoughts?
It's just been lovely. It's like, what a lovely way to spend an afternoon. So thank you so much for having me. And yeah, if anyone's listening and they're thinking about having a go at making or trying something new, just give it a go. Just do it.
And that means Ruth gives you permission. Therefore, don't waste it. Go out and do something with it.
Yeah, go cause havoc. We love it.
Thank you so much for taking your time and coming onto the podcast. And yeah, I do hope people go and subscribe to your channels, plural. And thanks everyone for listening. We're going to catch you on the next one.